Welcome to the Pirate Broadcast, where we interview interesting people doing interesting things, where you can expand your connections, your community. Kindness is cool and smiles are free. And let's get this party started. And it's a great day for the Pirate Broadcast, and welcome. If you're here watching live, drop us a comment, a question, get involved and engaged in the conversation. Also, if you're checking this out in the future, like and subscribe, leave a rating, all that kind of good social shenanigans go on. And today we're going to have a conversation with Lech. He's clear across the other side of the world, doing some things that are very interesting we're going to be talking about. And thank you, Lech, for being here.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where people are in the world. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Before the show, we were starting to talk about some of the things you're excited about and working on. And it's a very important topic right now. And it's about how workplaces are going to be evolving, how the workforce is going to be, developing communications, all of the things that take place in the workforce today. So why don't we dive into it and talk about what are your thoughts and what do you see trends and where do you see them moving today?
Well, there are a couple of trends, and obviously everybody is still trying to find their way. There's one thing that has become obvious in the last 3 or 4 months. We kind of knew it from late last year, but it's more surveys coming out on what people want in terms of their working environments, their working kind of structures, if you will. And there's always been research on this of how when are people most productive? How many days in the office or at home is kind of the right balance? And we've had Gallup who's done this type of research, and it says that people are most productive when they work from office, I think 2 or 3 days per week. Now there's more surveys coming out supporting that as a result of the pandemic and people being kind of in a working from home environment for better part of 12 months, if not longer in some instances. That's kind of the balance that they want. They want to retain that flexibility of being able to manage their time and fit work around their working schedules around, their private life schedules around the working life schedule. And I think that's kind of where organizations are going, because with these surveys and this kind of real life test of working from home or remote working, if you will, on such a grand scale, we've got data of what works, what doesn't work, what people want, what people don't want, what actually organizations want and don't want, or maybe are afraid of, because that's an interesting highlight and that's coming out as well. And I think that's kind of the way we do work. That landscape has shifted. When the pandemic started,
I was going to say, because a lot of people I talked to, they didn't think that work from home was going to work out very well. And surprisingly, a lot of organizations are now finding that work from home was actually more productive than they imagined. And it sounds like that might not necessarily be universal. Is that a fair statement?
I think there was a lot of trepidation, let's put it that way, for organizations when this was starting. Before the pandemic, working from home or remote working was exception rather than the rule. And was definitely in many organizations treated as a perk, a benefit for their employees. Right. Now they've proven that it's possible because they didn't have a choice. Overnight, in most countries, organizations had to move from in-office to work from home. And then that was no longer a perk. It was the only way to move forward for their employees, for the organization. And the challenges now that they face is kind of, yes, productivity did increase initially, but then it dropped off. So there was that kind of honeymoon period of people being able to work from home. It's kind of ups and downs. And I think it's now kind of getting to a steady point when people know what they want, don't want, what works for them, for their teams and their setups and their organizations and their teams in general. And I think that's kind of what we need to explore is there's not a rule for one or for the one rule for this for all organizations. I think it's very much individual to the organization, to the industry that they operate in, what they want to set up. It's just finding that balance that they want to go they want to move with to go forward with.
Yeah, I know, there's a lot of organizations that they might be manufacturing that work from home doesn't work. And so that's created its own challenges. And a lot of office work, now that things have eased up in some areas and people are going back to home, I notice more challenges from the people that are having to go back to work, go to traffic, travel and transport to the office. And so it would be surprising to see in another 12 months what that looks like and how they've adapted to go back to, because that's one of the things. I've been a remote worker for over a decade and work from home. And so for me, the idea of having to get in the car and drive to a location in an office and work 8 hours it just doesn't really fit my lifestyle anymore.
Unthinkable, isn't it? Once
Yeah,
you go into that, I've moved to proper work from home, remote working, and kind of being able to dictate my own working hours and working days, for that matter, a couple of years ago. And every now and again, I'll still sit sipping a coffee in the middle of a day or on a Wednesday in the sunshine, because it's somewhere where I am, and think about, what, I'm lucky that I have this. And there's a lot that I would trade to continue having this. Talking about what you mentioned in terms of that, it doesn't, remote working or working from home is not for everybody. I can't help but think about the meme of an airplane where there's a whole, obviously, the picture of the entire plane and all the passengers, and there's a comment, it's like the pilot is speaking through the tannoy to everybody. Hello, welcome on board, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that I'll be working from home today. Well, obviously, it's not going to work if you're an airline pilot, if you work in a factory. So it's not for every role, it's not for every organization. That has to be said. So you have to find these allowances. But there's one thing I urge every business owner, a leader in an organization, kind of people who get to decide these things, to think about. If your people have worked for your company for the past 12, 18 months and they've succeeded, your company's still operational, things were delivered, things were done, you have to really ask yourselves, what are they going to feel? How are they going to feel treated by you if you now say, okay, let's go back to the office, everyone, without asking them what they want? Because they've proven they can do this. They've proven that they can work, collaborate effectively and efficiently from home in this remote setup. If you just force them in without asking them, or please don't create an illusion of choice that you're asking them, but you already know what you want to do and you're going to force them in one direction or another anyway, just ask them. But if you are in that place where you get to decide, just be sure that you're not kind of under pressure, because there's nothing that will break trust and kind of employee satisfaction and happiness with the workplace more than such an exercise.
Yeah, that's part of leadership, is actually asking for your opinion and then listening to your opinion, right?
Yeah, very, very true. Because
we saw. Oh, go ahead, finish up.
I was to say, I'm very mindful of a lot of illusions of choice that we create day to day, and especially in leadership. And I think that's something that we really need to look closely at. That you create that people have the autonomy to make decisions, but actually when it comes to it, they're being pushed down a certain route to deliver a project, to finish a project, or whatever it might be, which basically becomes micromanagement, and people just feel cheated. They very often can't name that. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what emotions it is. They can't put their finger on it. But if you're stuck in a situation where you can't kind of put your finger on an emotion of what's going on, do consider that, whether you've potentially been pushed into a kind of situation where you've had an illusion of choice, but actually had no power over any decision that was being made.
It's surprising too how many people are resistant to going back to the office. I've heard a lot on, in the polls and in the public eye that the employees feel they're very productive and they feel like they've done their work and they've done everything that they need to do. And now it's, going back to the perk of staying at home. It's like, why are we having to be forced back into the office now? What's the reason to be forced back into the office, even though we've proven this, we've stood up, we've made it happen, we've made it work, and now why are you forcing us back? So that's another, I think, something that we need to kind of think about and reflect on as a community, and leadership has to think about that as well.
I definitely agree with that. I think some people do want to go back to the office. It's people who I've got a lot of extroverted friends who've been really struggling. Because on top of the fact that they were forced into working from home, they didn't have the usual opportunities that go with that, the usual benefits of being able to work from any coffee shop that they want, to be able to travel anywhere in the world they want and continue working. Obviously, that wasn't possible. So everybody was closed with, in those little bubbles that we've had. On the other thing, there are elements of collaboration, face-to-face meetings that you can't replicate in a virtual environment. So that's beneficial as well. So it's about finding that balance, what works for your team, for your organization. And there's some really good examples of what that might look like. I urge people to look at what HubSpot is doing, what Dropbox is doing. Some really positive stuff. Also, on the negative side, look what Apple has done. And that's a negative, that they had backlash because they assumed people want to go back to the office. So they forced everybody to go back to the office 3 days a week. Yeah. And Tim Cook had the massive fire on his hands that he had to put out, because he had to track back and actually, deal with that situation. But people said, actually, no, we are happy working from home. We want that flexibility. And yes, we miss our people, but our friends, our colleagues, but we continue working effectively and collaborating effectively virtually. So it's not that we don't want to go back. Just ask us, because the way it was done, everybody, not unanimously, but a lot of people are saying it lacked a lot of empathy on Apple's behalf. They didn't really ask people what they wanted.
Yeah, it's and I think Salesforce said, "Hey, we're never coming back to the office. Everything's virtual, and it's working out just fine." I wonder what the impact is going to be longer term on the property management and the real estate market as workplaces evolve and change and scale back, because there's a lot of buildings that are sitting virtually empty. And so is that anything that you're studying or investigating in your work?
Not necessarily studying, but it is a topic that I'm considering, because I walk past a lot of office buildings that are being built. And I'm thinking, oof, poor timing, because they obviously have a while on their hands before they're ready. But the other thing that really interests me is the impact on the property market, because if you think about it, all of a sudden we will need houses, apartments that are larger by at least one room, because everybody needs an office, a home office. And that's another reason why certain people do want to go back to the offices, is because they don't have that space, and actually working at home is problematic because they've got family and not enough space to have to focus and to work and focus comfortably. So that's something. So you will need, instead of a 2-bedroom flat, now you will need a 3-bedroom flat. And majority of the flats now being built, they tend to be 2-bed flats. So so the cost goes up. So you probably will be spending 15-20% more on a property if you were going to buy, or even if you're renting. So that's going to have an interesting knock-on effect, and something that obviously there's going to be an issue with supply, because the demand is going to be higher, but the supply is going to be much lower. And that's not going to change overnight. And in many countries in Europe, there's already a housing crisis where the people in power, whoever who is pulling the strings, they influence the supply and demand, because obviously that creates, there's the developers that build properties, they don't have any incentive to build more and quicker, because that means they will earn less. But that's probably for another podcast, definitely for another episode.
That's an entirely another subject. So tell us, Lech, how did you evolve into this subject of business and leadership and understanding the workforce and how the future of the workforce is evolving and where it can go. How did you start down this path, and what's
Uh,
your background in this?
I'm a project manager by trade. That's kind of technically
Okay.
my second trade. My first trade was being an English teacher. That's kind of
Okay.
what I've studied in my first university degree, but I've never really gone into that role. But then I went into marketing and project management and so on and so forth, and I really enjoy that because that really suits my personality and how I am as a person in general. But there's one thing I've very quickly realized: when managing projects, the for me, the successful delivery of a project wasn't down to deadlines and timescales and resource and things like that. Of course, those things are managed, they were important. But
Mhm.
what made or broke the success of a project were the people, how they collaborated, how they worked together, how they communicated, whether they had trust and psychological safety and things like that. So I often said that I manage egos on different projects because or on occasions it was like herding cats. It was one or the other. On other occasions, I was basically the linchpin between teams and departments that just didn't want to talk to one another, and I was forced. I hate meetings. Sorry, I hate unproductive meetings, so I
Yeah.
tend to limit the amount of them. But then I found myself often actually dragging people into a meeting so they would talk to one another, because otherwise it's something that would just take forever and a day. And that got me really interested. Inadvertently, I found myself a lot of the time doing all types of workshops to kind of improve communication and trust within teams.
Mm.
And along the way, I got introduced to Simon Sinek, Seth Godin, and all these people who have some really great ideas of how we can do things. And just kind of,
Yeah.
it was a hobby that at the beginning of last year, I thought, this is the opportunity. I'm taking a plunge into this and see how it goes. And very quickly, it kind of developed. Obviously, the pandemic then started literally about 2 months later, which was a blessing and a curse at the same time, because all of a sudden everybody's remote, which was a good thing because everybody's easier to reach. But there's also so much new stuff that you have to learn, and there's a lot of moving grounds, even when we're talking about the kind of going back to the office and so on. Should not be. There's a lot still like quicksands. We don't know where we stand. So kind of that's how it's evolved. And the future of work, I always kind of think of the term future of work. I'm not sure whether I agree with it, because I don't want it to be the future. I want it to be now. But that's kind of my impatience talking. But my motivation is to be the part of making it better for future generations, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we need to undo in terms of our business practices that stem back from the 70s and 80s and how we did things, and we continue to do them now, but it's just not working, because those tactics and those strategies sort of worked back then, but they've got very little place in today's world. And it's going to take a while to undo that, and I want to help that process. I want to help undo some of those business practices that we've introduced, so that future generations have a better opportunity to kind of thrive and be kind of really good at what they do in the best environment that they can flourish.
Well, it's always nice to be able to excel in any environment where you're working in projects. I want to say good morning to good day and say hello to the community here. Elise is in the house. Good morning, Russ, Lech. Luis is good morning, Lech and Russ. Groovy from Groovy Los Angeles. Jenny Gold in from Colorado. I'm excited to hear the conversation with Lech and Russ. Thank you so much, Jenny. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. Yes. Sarathi says hello and good morning to all Lech and comrades. Fantastic. Oh, and Russ Hedge is here. Good morning. Nina Perez. She's in. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. And then Jenny says, good morning, Russ Hedge. And then Russ says, workplace culture is so important. Things are changing, but we still need each other. We are better together. Absolutely, positively. I agree with that one. We are
Couldn't agree
better
more.
together. Good morning, Jenny. Sarathi says, hey, Jenny and Russ Hedge. We got lots of conversations going on here, Lech. So, Sarathi. Luis says, egos, exactly. I have seen great ideas shelved due to administrative egos. That's so true. Sherry Lolly, hey, good morning, Pirates. I want to talk. I want to talk a little bit about leadership and what leadership means today. Because with so many changes and potential shutdowns again, another wave of virus and things coming out and people getting sick. What do leaders have to deal with right now, and where do they need to put their focus in on the workforce as it relates to home and office, balance and asking questions? Where have you seen some good examples of leadership taking really a stance and making it better?
I've seen some really good examples of leaders actually becoming leaders and moving from being taskmasters or to-do list managers. Because that's one thing, that's one prerequisite for remote or from working from home setup or hybrid setup, whichever you are in, that you need to have for that setup to succeed. Because if you've got a manager who constantly checks on you and micromanages your work, that's not going to work. It's just simply not going to stick. People need autonomy. People need to be treated like adults, and people need to feel that they're trusted to make the decisions that they need to make to deliver on their kind of agreed objectives or OKRs or whatever it might be. So I'm a big believer of managers not being managers, but they're being more leaders or coaches in that kind of capacity. And I've seen it work a number of times. There's one example that comes to my mind. I've interviewed Luke Kite, who's the head of culture at Redico. They are a UK-based SEO agency, and they've gone through a cultural revolution a few years ago where they've basically, although they didn't attempt to aim to do that in the first place, but inadvertently become a self-organizing company, where basically removed all types of structures and all types of managers in the traditional sense. Obviously, they still got people that some people report to, but the role of a manager is to help the person grow and do their job. So looking at what do you need to be able to be successful in your role? What obstacles can I remove for you to be able to do your job? What development do you need to excel in your role, to move to the next level? That's kind of the structure that they've introduced. And for many organizations, for many people I speak to, they go like, no managers, no structures. People decide when, how, where, how many hours they work, a day, a week. They have unlimited holiday that can take whenever. Chaos. That's what a lot of people react with. And yes, for the wrong organization and for some people, for the wrong people, it can be chaos. It does need a fair bit of implementation time and kind of trial and error to see what works, what doesn't. But for them, it worked beautifully. They've grown year on year. 2019 or 2020, I can't remember now, they've been voted the 4th best place to work in the UK, and I think they've been also voted one of the best European small SEO agencies. So the proof is in the pudding, and there are more and more organizations that prove it works.
They're doing something right. So that's a self-managing company.
Yes, self-organizing setup structure. There are different terminologies for that. Basically, the principle is it's a relatively flat structure. Everybody you're grouped into teams, but yes, and you do have a person who is kind of equivalent to comparing it to the old structures, your line manager, but their responsibility is completely different. They're no longer responsible, because you are responsible for setting your own goals of what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve that, providing it feeds into the wider goals of the organization. And yeah, people like you said, and there's one thing that Luke said, that one of the biggest changes in him and the senior leadership team was to treat people like adults and believing the best in them, that they will make the best decisions. Yeah. And my first reaction was that, so how high was your staff turnover? Because this setup doesn't suit everybody. Because some people just prefer to have somebody behind them, not nagging, but just giving them that structure.
I need a checklist.
Exactly, guidance. It does require a lot of independence. And surprisingly, I don't remember the figure, but it definitely wasn't high. But he has heard of organizations where they've done that, other organizations where they've done that, and the turnover was 30-40%.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
can
just that.
imagine
But
so.
it wasn't as a result that they were laying people off. It was just like people saying it just doesn't fit me. I was like, okay,
No.
that's fine. This is the way the organization's going. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome. We'll help you out. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. Go and look for another job. We'll support you in the process. And it's that kind of employee people relationship that we really need.
Absolutely, absolutely. What kind of companies? Is there any companies that mind in their structure and their way they do business that you admire?
Oh, yes, there are a few. So Redico, the SEO agency that I've mentioned, would be one of them. There are a few others. They are US based. One of them is called oh my god, the name now escapes me. They are a digital agency as well, and they've been featured. Next Jump, they're called, and they are at the forefront of being a DDO, what's called a DDO, which stands for Deliberative Developmental Organization, which is basically put people first. And
Mm.
I'm not sure whether they still have that rule, but they used to have the rule that you cannot be fired for performance-related problems within the organization. You can sort of disciplinary potentially, yes, but performance, no, you can't be. They'll do everything to help you. So that's one of them. It's really one. The other one is John Chapman's organization, and again the name escapes me. But basically, he introduced the concept of heart counts instead of head counts. So you think about when you need to let people go. You don't think of that. Head count is just an inanimate object that you use that term to separate yourself from it being a human being. But if you think that human being has a heart, you think about heart counts. And I really, really like that because the decision to fire somebody or let somebody go because the business is underperforming will be much tougher for you, and you probably will be more pushed to make different decisions to kind of do everything you can to both save the organization and the people. Because obviously, if the company goes under, the people will lose their jobs anyway. So you have to find that balance.
Yeah, there's always balance. I I'm kind of curious in the remote work and working from home statistics. Have you found any evidence that some of the people, or is there a percentage of the individuals that because they're not traveling, they're not in their car, they're not commuting to work, that they're actually working more at home than what they used to?
Drastically more. I don't have the statistics to hand, but I can tell you that because the boundaries between work and personal life are, I don't want to say non-existent, but at the very least very, very blurred, it's easy to say, I'll work another 10 minutes. And that 10 minutes turns into half an hour.
Yeah.
And so what I've noticed in some organizations from talking to people, that there is that pressure for overperformance. And this is unfortunately, it usually appears in organizations where there's a fair bit of toxic culture, because it's toxic behavior, basically, where if, I don't know, some people, parts of the team or whole organization now doesn't have to commute, that means it's an unsaid expectation that they will work more. They will work that commute time, which you think about, it's a bit backwards, because we already, most countries overwork anyway. The concept of in at least in the UK, I think it's 37 and a half hours a week. That's the working week. That is just but a number, nothing else. I don't know a person who works that. Most people work more, and I think that's backwards again. I think we really need to go away from that, and we need to move away from the working by hours attitude. We need to move into a goal-based mindset. So basically, judge people by the results that they deliver, and it's up to them how they do that. Because I see hundreds of examples.
Yeah, if I can get my task done in half the time, why shouldn't I be rewarded for it?
Precisely. And a lot of people, and I know a good friend of mine mentioned that to me the other day, that she does 30% of her 300% of her targets, because she's just quick at what she does. And I was like, okay, that's really good for you that you have that. But then that begs the question, if other people are doing 100% of their target in 8 hours and you're doing 300% in 8 hours, well, should you be doing that much? Should you be paid more? Should you be given more? Or should you work less?
Yeah.
Should you work 3 hours instead of 8. If you just work your norm, happy days.
Yeah. Yeah. This is fascinating subject, and I really appreciate that you've been here. And so how do people get a hold of you, Lech? How do you like people to connect with you?
Best way is LinkedIn. That's all. Although LinkedIn's messaging system is a little bit difficult to maneuver, and apologies if somebody messages me and I don't reply. Potentially is because it's just dropped down the list somewhere and it's difficult to recall that information. But LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect. Alternatively, by email, which is lech @human.pm. That's probably the best way to do if there's something that you want to discuss. But if you want to connect, I highly encourage people to visit me on LinkedIn. I also host a podcast on leadership and culture. If somebody, if I'm guessing your audience is interested in that, because obviously they listen to your show, they might be interested in that, and that's called We Got This, because I believe that together we can solve a lot of problems. So if you just put that into Spotify, Apple Podcast, I'm sure it will come up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for showing up, joining us live on the Pirate Broadcast. And as always, kindness is cool, smiles are free, so you enjoy the day. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you for joining the Pirate Broadcast. If you found this content valuable, please like, comment, and share it across your social media channels. I would love the opportunity to help others grow in their business. The Pirate Syndicate is a platform where you show up, we produce the show. It's that easy. If you want to be seen, be heard, and be talked about, join the Pirate Syndicate